Hey guys, it's King. Welcome to another Autism Digest interview, where today we have an amazing individual. He is an animator known for James and the Giant Peach, the California Raisins commercials, which he has on screen next to him, a piece of food commercial history. And he's a father to an autistic individual. He is Webster Concord. Thanks for coming
Colcord.
on, Webster.
Hi, Webster Colcord. Yeah, with an L. Not that it makes a big difference. Hi, Caden. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. My first question for you is, for those that may not know you, do you mind telling a bit of your story in your own words?
Yeah, I started working as a professional in animation when I was very young. I was just 18 when I worked for the Will Vinton Studios, which was famous at the time out of Portland, Oregon, famous at the time for the California Raisins. This was back in the late 80s. I started there in 87, and the first production I worked on was the Claymation Christmas special, Claymation Christmas Celebration, and then later Meet the Raisins, and then we did Raisins Sold Out and a Halloween show, and we did five things for CBS. But I also worked on a lot of commercials like the Tang Fruit Lips. This one, the fingers have come off of this guy, but this is from one of the Tang Hardee's commercials. And then I also did my own work for Nickelodeon. I did some interstitials for Nickelodeon. A lot of people will remember the Nick Jr. station ID. I did that. And and then I still am working in animation today. Most notably, recently I worked on an episode of Star Wars Skeleton Crew, which had an animated sort of crab creature. We call it the trash crab.
Well, that's impressive. You've done pretty much everything 90s and 80s kids grew up. Uh, my next question for you is, you are a father to an autistic individual. Do you mind telling us a bit of what it was like when you first found out your daughter was on the autism spectrum?
Yeah, it's really been a journey, and I have to say, it's really been wonderful that over the years, a lot of fans of my work, especially the work I did for Nickelodeon, have reached out to me, and and they happen to be autistic, and so it's been really interesting to find out that my bloodline has a history of neurodivergence as well, most notably in my daughter, Lily, who is autistic. And it took a long time for us to, and she's going to probably interrupt us in the in the course of this interview, but we didn't know how to understand, her social interaction until we got the autistic diagnosis when she was about 10 year 9 years old. And then it sort of explained everything, and it opened up a whole world of understanding, like understanding, like, you know how she feels about justice, and her truth, and fairness, and also how she needs to move. Like, different people express their autism different ways, and she happens to be a person who, she needs to, when her emotions get to a certain level, she needs to move her body. So she may just run through any second now.
I definitely respect that. For me, I express myself through doing stuff like that. Yeah, so I can definitely relate. My next question for you is, what have you learned about patience, communication, and creativity through parenting?
Well, patience. Wait, patience. And what was the second one?
Patience, communication, and
Uh,
creativity.
Patience, communication, and creativity. So that's a big question. So patience um, is probably the hardest thing, and it has to do with understand trying to remember that, as a parent, you want to be your best self. And I mean, that's the best thing I can say. Like, you want to be, always try to be the best parent you can be. And when, in those times when your cup is full as a parent, and you're about to explode or something, overreact, you got to remember that, you know, it's going to pass, so. that's one of the things I've learned about patience, and also remembering that, you know, my autistic child is expressing herself in the way that she needs, and it has nothing to do with, you know, it has nothing to do with me, really. She needs to express herself in the way she is. Um, Communication, what I've learned is that not to ask questions that are broad, like at the end of the day, coming home from school, not to say, "How was your day?" Because how does a person who's autistic explain the vast number of interconnected things that happen during an entire day? You have to ask very specific questions. And also to be careful in terms of the nuance you express as a sort of more neurotypical person, although I hate that word, that phrase. But try to express, say what I mean and make it clear, not express something with my tone of voice, because she might not understand that. Although she's pretty good with those things. And then finally, creativity has been the most fascinating because my daughter, I have four kids, and two of the four have expressed a great deal of the same kind of artistic bent that I have. And Lily, my autistic child, she is able to do that hyper focus thing that comes both with autism and a bit of ADHD. And so when she gets into a project, she goes all the way. And so that's something that I admire. And but I also know that that can be destructive sometimes from my own experience. Going, you know, working on a project until my body, is in trouble. So, um, yeah, it's all been kind of reinforcing things I suspected already, and also but also like opening wide, the possibilities of like rethinking like how I interact with people. Anyway, a long answer for a big question, series of questions.
And it's a good one. I'll also add that, in a way, those three things intersect with one another because you
Oh
have to
yeah.
be creative and patient when you're communicating with any chip, yet alone one that's neurodivergent. So I
Yeah.
definitely like your answer. My next question for you is, in your view, how can animation better represent neurodivergent individuals and families?
Well, I think better represent. That's a good question. I think that you're seeing more of it in entertainment. You're seeing more characters written so that they don't. When I was a kid, you'd have characters written as autistic, and they were the butt of the joke, or they were the comedy relief. But sometimes they were also the main character, and obviously there's a need in our human there's a need in our existence as a species for people who are autistic. They serve roles traditionally. I think this is all speculation, but based on my observance, they serve roles in society that you need somebody who can do the kind of things that an autistic person can do really well, like the ability to concentrate and be fastidious and those kind of things. So I think maybe I mean it's a tough one because I think maybe now in entertainment they're treating people who are leaning toward the autistic side, more fairly and not making them just, the nerd or, the comedy relief because they're awkward, that we're able to like to see the awkwardness not as awkwardness but as honesty, you know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think Hollywood definitely has a long way to go in the sense of proper representation.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, we're making amazing progress. The nerd and comic relief tropes aren't as prominent and anymore for just nerd versus individuals specifically. I think where it stands, there needs to be consultations with the community Neat.
Yeah.
My last question for you is, what's your advice to any parent who might have an autistic child and may not know what to do?
Um, well, I would say be very, gosh, that's a tough one because I didn't, as parents of an autistic child, we didn't do the right things, all the time. Of course, we made mistakes. We had Lily in a a therapy program that was not neuroaffirming. It was more about masking to fit in. Um, and that wasn't really helpful. And luckily, she's very resilient, and she sort of, she dealt with it in her own way, and we got through it. And she's still who she's still the person that we love, and hasn't changed. Um, uh, so so I'd be careful, what programs it's all about research because we're all finding so much more information now, new discoveries. At the same time, we've got politicians who are going the opposite direction while parents are going in the neuro divergent community are going in the right direction. We've got politicians going the opposite way. So be really careful, do your research, and I think it's important to listen to your intuition. Like when I was going through the program with Lily, there were a lot of things that didn't feel right. Like, I'm very attached to my daughter, and there were things that they were asking her to behaviors they were asking her to change, that just things in the program that just didn't feel right. And I needed to, and I did trust those instincts, and didn't comply with some of those not neuro affirming you know lessons they tried to teach in a not a healthy way. So trust your instincts, I'd say, as a parent.
It doesn't get much simpler than that. I really like that piece of advice. Anyways, that's going to do it for this interview, guys. Thank you so much to Webster for coming on and sharing his perspective. If you guys want to see more amazing interviews, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Autism Digest channel. Pick up your print issue of our November issue that's out now. It looks a little something like this. You can get by going to autismdigest.com, and stay tuned for the audio file of this interview to be posted on our Spotify. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.